These Korean women are accusing the US military of promoting forced prostitution in a lawsuit for the first time ever. I interviewed some of the survivors who are demanding a US apology for the lifetime of shame and silence they were forced to endure. They're also asking for a compensation of $7,200 per survivor.
그게 확실을 한 건데도 모른 척 하잖아요.
In the lawsuit, the women accused the US military of locking them up to forcibly treat the women for sexually transmitted diseases. These detention centers were constructed as part of a US-led cleanup program to decrease the rate of STDs in camp towns. So we're in one of the former detention centers right now, and it's also known as a monkey house because that's what the US soldiers call the women who were screaming for their lives. So the women were brought here if they were suspected to have an STD, and many of the women describe seeing their former colleagues die in these very cells.
맞기 전에 서로 눈을 쳐다봐. 야, 무서워가지고 눈이 겁들을 먹어가지고 나 죽으면 어떡하냐? 너 죽으면 오늘 죽으면 어떡하냐?
The US used penicillin to treat the women in such high amounts that many of the survivors witnessed people dying from shock or overdose.
인권 박물관 세워줬으면 좋겠어요. 그래야지 나 같은 소녀들이 또 안 만들어질 것 같아요.
Despite protests to preserve this last standing detention center, the government is pushing forward with its demolition. This lawsuit accusing the US military comes after the women's victory against the South Korean government. In 2022, the Supreme Court ruled the government was guilty of encouraging a system of prostitution around US bases. These archival meeting records show US military leaders who were involved in the systematic support of the sex trade. The US and Korea have one of the strongest military alliances with more than 70 US bases in the country. And if you visit the former camp towns today, they've been rebranded as tourist attractions.
These are the same streets that were part of the designated camp towns where the women worked to cater specifically to US soldiers. And although it's not as crowded anymore, these bars and clubs still exist to serve US soldiers. So this club right here, it has a sign that says only for foreigners, and Koreans are not allowed inside.
While the government no longer facilitates these streets, Filipino women are now being trafficked into sex work, often lured with false promises of singing jobs at bars. After decades of silence, the Korean women seeking to hold the US military accountable say it was the real culprit behind the state-sanctioned sex trade.